My name is Justin Gage, and you're tuned in to the Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions podcast with your host, Jason Woodbury.
Where's my love when the sky begins to turn and the air is cool like water? In this world, it takes some effort to recall who I am.
So great to have you back. Thanks again for joining us here on Transmissions. My guest this week is Martin Courtney of Real Estate. They've got a new album out this week. It's an EP called Half a Human. And Martin and I connected to discuss what it was like to put it together during the pandemic, getting a new drummer in the process, exploring some new directions with a trusted collaborator, and sort of the influence of the live music element. And I think it was a great talk, and I really enjoyed hanging out with Martin and getting to ask him a bunch of questions. So without further delay, let's get into it. But before that, I want to remind you, of course, that one of the best ways you can support this podcast is by sharing it, telling folks about Transmissions. You might have noticed that there's no advertising on the podcast as of late. That might change at some point, but right now we're just trying to focus on making sure that we're delivering the most interesting and fun and exploratory conversations that we can. So what you can do to help us do that is share this. You can leave a rating or a review wherever you listen. And if you want to take your support a step further, Aquarium Drunkard is on Patreon, so go check it out over there. All right, here is my talk with Martin Courtney of Real Estate. Pick up your copy of Half a Human this Friday, and I'll speak with you more on the other side.
Likely than not, I'm with you.
Martin, thanks so much for joining us here on Transmissions. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So before the lockdown, Real Estate went on a sort of guerrilla tour of defunct New York record stores. I think you played outside of other the former locations, Other Music, Rocks in Your Head, and Kim's. So I thought maybe we could start with a two-part question, which is, one, how important were record stores to you growing up? And two, if you walk in a record store now, where are you going first? Where you got to head?
Okay. Growing up, it was me and Alex from the band and Julian also. A bunch of us grew up together in this little, suburb of New York City. There were really the only real record store up until when we were in high school. This little, actual cool little record store opened up for about a year, but then shut down again because it did, in our town. Because there's really not that kind of clientele in our town, but we were really lucky to live close to the city. So, we would take the bus in and go to specifically those stores that you mentioned, especially for some reason Rocks in Your Head was I don't know, we would go there a lot. And yeah, they were important in that I think we kind of had the classic experience of maybe not actually talking to the person behind the counter as a 16-year-old. I was so shy, but even just being surrounded, getting the suggestion from the cool older music aficionado, although maybe there was a little bit of that. There was that, which I will get to, but specifically when we would go to the city, it would just be just to be exposed to that whole world as a high school kid was really exciting. And just seeing kind of being vaguely aware of something Elephant Six or something, and then seeing like a whole section of Elephant Six like cassettes and CDRs and stuff at like Rocks in Your Head, and being like, I'm just gonna buy a couple of these and see what it is, and being exposed to music that way was really cool. And then yeah, when this little store did open up in our town, we ended up kind of like just like grasping onto this guy whose name was Josh, who started the store, who was probably like my age now, like a young guy. He had like a young kid, yeah, and like him and his wife just like moved to town, and he idealistically started this record store, but we were just like, give us jobs. And he was like, he was like, I can't hire anyone. Like, this is like a small operation, but if you want, you can hang out and like help me organize things. And he definitely introduced me to a few things. Like he showed me like Yo Tango for the first time. He's like, I think you'd like this, which was cool because, they became one of my favorite bands. And what was the other part of the question?
The other part of the question is, when you walk in a record store now,
oh yeah,
what section do you go to first?
I mean, I tend to always. I haven't been to a record store in a long time at this point, but I used to always just go to the new arrivals, the new used arrivals, which maybe a lot of people do, but that just to me seemed like it's kind of all mixed together, but like maybe you're gonna find something cool that like hasn't really been picked over yet, I guess. So that's my general like first stop for sure.
Somehow I knew that's what you were gonna say, but that's because that's what I do too. And I was like, yeah, that's what everybody does. Like you go, let's see what they got here in this spot where they've put the stuff that sort of hasn't, yeah, exactly, like you said, hasn't been picked over.
Yeah,
you haven't had as many diggers sort of, getting all of the gold out, in that area.
For sure.
I feel like, what you were talking about is such an interesting thing, because the beauty of, how often would you buy something, from, let's say, the Elephant Six section that you weren't 100% sure what it was?
I mean, 100% of the time, like with that, with that specific section, it was definitely just like, well, I've heard, like I'm into whatever, Neutral Milk Hotel or like Apples in Stereo or something. So like whatever this Beulah band is, they're probably pretty cool. And you know what I mean? Stuff like that. Like definitely I would just go blind into things like that.
Yeah.
And like I remember specifically, like I bought the first Stephen Malkmus solo record, like right when it came out, it was like probably on a display or something, and I was like, I think this is the guy from Pavement. Like I didn't really know anything, and I brought it home and just loved it. And for some reason, all those kind of, I mean, maybe not. I haven't really listened to the Elephant Six stuff in a while, but like a lot of the stuff that I kind of discovered at that point in my life, I mean, this is also probably true for most people. Like that remains to this day, like some of my favorite music, or the stuff that I kind of like, cherish. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's the factor of it being, having sort of the personal nostalgic value, and at that point in your life, it's really easy to become attached to stuff like that. But I also think that what you're talking about and that kind of discovery is such an interesting thing that, now it's I'm sure that there's still the feeling of going in blind, even for kids who listen primarily, on streaming platforms and stuff. I'm sure that feeling exists in some form or another, but it seems, like so different than the way most media is interacted with now.
Yeah, I can't really, it's just one of the, I mean, I hope so, and I'm sure it is. I mean, there's definitely like people still love music and are discovering it somehow, and it almost doesn't matter how, people find it, as long as it's still, people are still forming these relationships with it. Like I don't want to say like going to a record store is like the best way, like, or talking to the like probably sort of snobby person behind the counter, like that you're scared of, but like knows a lot, or maybe friendly, who knows. I'm just saying, like, that's definitely not, there are lots of ways to approach music fandom for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely find things now, like, I guess through just like blogs, like stuff like you guys, like whatever, posting things on Instagram or whatever, just being like, the cover art looks cool, or like that description kind of like,
Right.
sounds interesting to me. So I mean, I guess that's just how you do it now. I mean, it's every once in a while, very very rarely, it'll be through like, I'm gonna click on this like playlist that Spotify like algorithm put together for me, and like every once in a while I found stuff through that, although I kind of hate it. But I mean, I don't hate the music.
You hate that they pegged you that way. They got you in a
yeah,
weird
or
way?
like yeah, I mean, for sure, or that it's just like, that it wasn't. I mean, I'm sure in some way there's a reason that it was put in front of me that isn't just like ones and zeros, but maybe not. I don't know. It feels a little weird. Although any way to like find out about something that I hadn't heard before that is exciting is definitely not a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of on the record nerd side of things, I was thinking about how Half a Human is it's great, and I really, really have enjoyed it. I've been listening to specifically the title track, probably my most listened to single of the year.
Awesome.
I just keep listening to it over and over again. But I was thinking about how it's categorized as an EP, and then I started thinking about how, I mean, Slayer's Rain and Blood is like 29 minutes long. Beach Boys' Wild Honey is only 24 minutes long. And I
love
wondered,
short albums.
is it cool with you if I consider this like a full Real Estate LP?
A mini LP. Yeah, sure. That's fine. Yeah, I wish we could convince our label that it was an LP.
Is there, as when you conceive of it, I mean, does it feel like there is sort of a discernible, when does an EP become a mini LP for you?
Well, I mean, I think some of it has to do with length. My dog is going to bark in the background.
Yeah, mine will at some point. It's like, it's impossible to keep it from happening.
That's fine. It's the reality of doing these things. I think it's length. I think it's cohesion, and I think these songs fit together pretty well. I mean, partially, like, I think to me, like, it's like the reason it's an EP and not an LP. I mean, besides the fact that it's only 6 songs, and I think in my head I'm like, an LP is at least 9 songs, like, or whatever, is the fact that like these songs kind of got their start during the sessions for another LP.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so I guess in my mind, it's like, it's sort of tied.
A continuation.
It's tied to that record. Whereas like, if we were going to if we had a batch of 6 songs that were like kind of, beefy songs, like these ones are, like they're lengthwise, I think it could count. And if we were like, this is a project, like these are 6 songs, we're going to go into the studio and record them, like, then maybe it would be something that where I would be thinking about it differently. But since it's like, I mean, these songs were by no means finished at all during, like, when we kind of like left them by the wayside at a certain point to focus on the record, the songs that ended up on the LP. And we were like, we'll get to you guys later. And part of me was like, we'll set these guys aside for the next record. But then I think once all this stuff happened with COVID and whatever, it was just like, it was hard to imagine carrying these songs forward onto another record. Like, they felt like they were from a very specific previous era of the band. And I was like, any songs that get written from now on, it's just like, it's going to feel weird mixing them. So then it was like, but we also didn't want to just let those songs, die. We wanted, so it was like, and we were excited about them, like the reason they kind of fell to the side, like it was almost like we felt like we had so much good material. Initially we were like, well, maybe we should put fewer songs on the main thing and just split this into 2 full albums. And then we were like, well, why do that? Like, whatever. And there's a lot of discussion.
Of course.
But so So that's a long way of answering your question, which is to say, no, this definitely feels like an EP to me. But if people see it as something stronger than, I mean, like in the tradition of, I think, good EPs, like it definitely stands on its own, and I think the only thing that keeps it from being an actual LP is like, yeah, just basically the number of songs on it.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, that's absolutely right, that like a good EP, we've already mentioned Yo La Tengo, who, in addition to making some of my favorite LPs, when they put an EP out, it's usually, such a cool and unique, and it's pared down in terms of length or whatever, but often it gives them a chance to explore stylistic detours and stuff like that, and there's a little of that on this record, but I'm curious because so did most of these songs sort of have their roots in the sessions that you guys did with, it's Kevin McMahon, right?
Kevin McMahon. Yep. Yeah.
So most of these had roots in the main thing sessions.
Yeah, I mean they all did. Yeah, and I mean, it's true that I think, I mean, like when we kind of finished this thing, and then definitely like when I got the test pressing and I was listening to it, I was like, this is cool. Like, I almost think sometimes EPs, I mean it just is different. It's a different vibe, for lack of a better word, than an LP, but it kind of has its own feeling when you listen to it. Like a good, it's I don't know. It's hard to put this feeling into words. I've thought about it a lot, and I'm like, I'm going to try and describe this in an interview at some point. I'm going to sound like an idiot, but like,
I'm so honored that you'll sound like an idiot with us,
with you guys. No, like, just kind of like whatever that feeling is, like when you put on like the cool, it almost feels like, well, this is like a lesser thing in their discography. However, like maybe it has like one of my favorite songs of, or whatever, like,
absolutely.
So that's kind of like the feeling that I was getting when I was listening to this EP, and I was like, oh, I'm glad that we kind of took the time to do this. We only have one other EP from earlier, from like, right when our first record came out. And so it's kind of nice to kind of have this sort of in the grand scheme of like all the records that we've put out, to have like this cool little thing. And it's also true that I think if we had included these songs on a record, we probably would have had, I would assume that like there would have been some editing done like to them. Like I think we kind of allowed these songs to be like kind of like, for example, In the Garden is like, I think like over 6 minutes long, and it's got this long outro that is fairly repetitive, but it builds and it kind of goes on its own little journey. But I think if we were going to have it on like an actual record, we probably would have cut it a little bit shorter and like edited it and kind of made it kind of more of a normal song length. And so there's a few things like that on the record where we just kind of allowed it to be weirder, because we were like, kind of the stakes are a little bit lower, like, or whatever, and through that you almost end up with something that's more surprising or whatever.
I was thinking about it, and I know with the main thing, there was, sort of a conscious effort to shake up what you do when you make records, And so I thought about how I think that you explored a lot of new terrain on that record, and then that continues with this EP, but it does feel maybe slightly less, maybe a little woollier, a little like more open around the edges, and that must have been an interesting thing to explore. I mean, there's almost D+ almost feels like some sort of like prog country thing or something. So it's like, this is such a cool thing. I just wonder that willingness of, it's no secret that obviously there's a sound associated with what you do that is recognizable, and that people love to sort of slot these things into their chill playlists and all that stuff. But it does feel like there's an increasing interest on your part to like shake out of that a little bit, to try some other things. And I just wonder, you've been a band for a while now. Does it feel just like this is the natural, you just want to keep it fresh and interesting for yourself and for the listeners who've been around for the whole ride? Someone like Kevin, who, I mean, you guys worked with him in 2011, right? He worked on Days, right?
He did the Days record, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, working with somebody who's been with you, who knows you that well, I have to imagine that allowed you to feel that much more comfortable trying new things, exploring.
Yeah, I mean that was the idea. Like, we kind of went into this record with kind of aware of the fact that people kind of associated a certain sound with us, and yeah, like you said, like they kind of people seem to have us pegged, for better or for worse. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing at all, but we were like, let's try and the other funny thing is I do think that with each record we really have like tried to push ourselves to like expand our horizons, but I think with this one in particular we were just like, we're gonna really like, like kind of open things up, and the decision to work with Kevin, it was almost counterintuitive because initially you'd think like, okay, we want to like try new things, like why would we go back to the guy that we made like in some people's fans of ours would consider to be like a seminal record for us, and like, so why would we go back to him rather than like try something totally different. But like you said, that the thought process was basically like, we're going to be really comfortable with this guy, we know him, and he is going to actually push us harder than somebody that we don't necessarily know as well, because that's kind of how it is with people that if you're comfortable with somebody, you can kind of like speak the truth to them, and that's kind of how he was with us. He's like, what are you guys trying to do here? Like if he felt like we were sleepwalking through something, he would let us know, and that was kind of what we wanted from him. Yeah.
What's he? We'll get back to some of the themes that you're talking about, but I while I was preparing for this interview, I started looking Kevin up personally. Mm-hmm. He's got like kind of he's pretty all over the place history wise, right? Sort of involved in industrial music at one point. Like, how does all that factor in? How did you guys meet him?
So it's a good story. When I was in high school, I was in a band with Patrick Sickles, who is the main songwriter in Titus Andronicus, and another friend of ours, Andrew Cedarmark, who puts out really great records under his own name, still to this day. But anyway, we had a band that we were like, took really seriously, and we're like, like whatever. It was we decided to make an album, and we were all really big fans of the Walkmen. And I was on the Walkmen website one day and saw that they had a studio in Harlem that was like, rent our studio. So like, we kind of pooled our money together and rented the studio, and I think half thinking that we were going to be like produced by like whatever, some guy from the Walkmen. But it was like Kevin was kind of their in-house engineer guy. And so we met him then when I was like 18, and we always kept in touch, and he ended up producing a couple, I think maybe every Titus Andronicus record. And he was just somebody that we always kept in touch with. And then when we finally like had a budget to make our first, like, once real estate started happening, and our first record we kind of home recorded, and then the second record we were like, okay, we're going to go to a real studio. Like, Kevin was kind of the obvious guy to ask. So that's how we met him, and he's been, kind of sort of part of this, like, my whole musical journey from when I was a kid. Yeah. And yeah, so he has worked on a lot of stuff. He like produced a couple like Swans records, I think, and like he's just kind of like our guy. And it's funny. I mean, I think with our particular style of music, like, I think on the surface we're pretty different stylistically, but he also really gets it. And it's also like, we kind of just know, you kind of know what you're getting into with him. Like it's definitely like a two-way street, and he's going to push back on certain ideas from us, and we're going to have to push back on certain ideas from him, but it's definitely like really collaborative. Whereas, like I was saying before, certain other times when we've made records with people, super talented producers who like we've always gotten along with everyone that we've worked with. So like I'm not saying we've ever had a bad experience, but it's just when you meet somebody and then like the next day you're making an album together, it's just a very different experience, like if, and
Right.
you're kind of getting to know them as you're doing this thing that's like on the permanent record. And it's just a little bit different, I mean, and you end up with sometimes the results vary when you do things that way.
You've obviously known Alex and Julian for a very long time, so that sort of familiarity that you're talking about is baked into that aspect. But there's also been a willingness with Real Estate to go all over the map and to bring other people into the fold. You guys got a new drummer amidst pandemic. Is that how does that work? How do you find a new drummer when the world is crashing down?
I mean, actually, that was also, we have Kevin to thank, Kevin McMahon. I mean, basically what happened was like Jackson mentioned right before the record, a couple weeks before the main thing came out, like maybe 2 or 3 months before we were going to start touring, that he was just like, I just don't really want to tour on this record. And we're like, damn, like, that sucks because we really love you. And also like, you played on this thing and we really, like whatever. And also we have to now find a drummer. And like, this was obviously pre, lockdown and when we still thought we were going to be touring.
Right.
So yeah, we started asking around and we talked to a few different people, and Sammy, she's local to me. She lives up in Kingston. So she's kind of like in the area, and she came highly recommended, through Kevin, who's worked with her on some other projects. And basically he knows us, he knows our style, and he also knows us as people. And so I was like,
right.
I trusted him to, I trusted his suggestion. I mean, and, because we're kind of asking a lot. So, I mean, we were basically like, do you have 3 months to spare, to go on tour? But yeah, and so we got to know her, and she's really, really awesome. And we've like, to this day have not been able to play a show together, unfortunately. But we've done a bunch of stuff like remotely with her, different like sessions that we've had to record, and like, I mean, she's in now. Like,
yeah.
So it's great. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I think about, so the sort of roots of these songs, the basic stuff was maybe there from the sessions with the record, but you did spend
Jackson,
time.
Like Jackson plays on the EP, like
right.
Yeah.
But did you overall? I mean, in order to finish this EP up, did you all sort of remotely collaborate? How did that process feel to you?
Yeah, I mean, it was cool. I think like we had to do a few different things. Like I was saying, like we had to do these like radio sessions and stuff, and which was like, record a cover or like re-record some songs or whatever, like things that we would normally have done live, like on tour. We would have showed up at the radio station and like recorded a session. But as a way of promoting the album, we just did them remotely, and that was sort of like proof of concept that we were able to do it. And for some reason, we'd never really done stuff like that before, even though like I'm sure a lot of musicians would say the same thing. It's just like the infrastructure was there, but we just never thought to do it. But we were like, that was cool, like, and then we started like passing demos around that way, and then sort of the idea came to finish this EP, and it was I mean, it was comfortable. Honestly, it worked really well. It was just like, listen to these songs, like, each member of the band, or basically me and Matt and Julian and Alex, because the percussion was pretty much there. And it was just like, if you, like, there were certain things where I was like, I think this part needs a guitar solo, or I think, like, maybe we could add some, like, cool, like, synth pads here, or whatever. But it was mostly just like, if you hear anything that you want to add, or if you have any ideas, just record them. Just send everything. And then like, and there was 1 or 2 songs that needed vocals, so I had to write some lyrics, and then we just booked like I booked like a couple days with Kevin, and back in September of last year, and went in all masked up and spent a couple days just like mixing the thing and kind of editing the parts together and like turning it into like a cohesive unit. So yeah, it was sort of a hybrid of like remote and then like a little bit of in studio.
It's really interesting because Half a Human leans in so much to the sort of live element. It feels like such a, I mean, it's not that that's the first time those sort of jammier tendencies have emerged in the discography. I think they've been there, but it's cool to hear it embraced the way it is. And I loved the sort of contrast of that sort of jammier, very live feeling, very groove and like kind of on stage inspired thing, being paired with exactly what you're talking about, which is sort of incorporating ideas that were done more individually and sort of forming that into a more cohesive thing.
It just shows how easily we can be fooled by like what I'm saying. Like we recorded like Half a Human, and we've actually employed this method a few times, but like the first half of the song is sort of more traditional song structure, and then the second half is like this jam. So it's all recorded live, but we recorded it in sections, and we did the first half all together, with then added some overdubs, and then the second half is pretty much almost all live, which was, and because also like it was like we recorded the first part to a click, and then we recorded the second part just jamming without a click, just to have it feel a little more loose. But there are some elements, I guess I probably won't say which ones, but like there are some elements of that jam section that were recorded post COVID remotely, but they and I was a little worried that like they weren't going to blend so well, or that they would stick out, or like it just wouldn't have that like vibe that like you get when everyone's playing in a room.
Right.
But it did. it just did. You just put it in there and you're like, all right, this sounds great actually. Does keeping some sense of that vibe require you to get in a certain headspace or mind? Like what does it take to sort of make sure that it has that feel? Because again, like I said, I've listened to this thing over and over again, and it feels like the waves crashing. It's got the live feel. It's great, But what do you do to sort of make sure that the stuff doesn't end up accidentally becoming sterile or less, less emotionally satisfying than what it is that you ended up with on this record? I mean, I think if you're recording music, no matter how you're doing it, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I think all of us in the band, it's like you just get into the headspace of like the song, and you listen to it a few times and to get a few takes until you get something that you're excited about. But like, yeah, I mean, I think you just kind of get into it,
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened. I think it's just like you can kind of close your eyes and pretend you're there, kind of thing. Which is like, I mean, it's true. It's like vocals. I've always overdubbed vocals, and that's always been kind of like, it's tricky. Like that's actually like a very specific example of like, you really want to be in the headspace. You want to, ideally be playing live. But like for me, like it just, I'm not going to get a perfect take simultaneously with like the band getting a perfect take, like I really want to take my time with the vocals, so like
of course,
so it's like it's like I would say it's like acting, but like I mean it's just the only difference between playing it live with the band and standing in the studio with headphones on in front of a microphone. It's just like I just have I just have the music cranked really loud, and you just kind of have to just go there.
Yeah.
But I think it's important with every element, every single element. Even if you're just like shaking a shaker, you gotta kind of have to be into it. I mean, I guess this sounds like very basic, like music making to anyone that's a musician who's listening. But like that's just how it is for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that sort of you mentioned, it's a good example of how sort of easily we can get fooled. And But I think about even more than that. I think it's an example of the sort of weird intentionality of playing something. It's like if you believe that there's a good way to get to where you're trying to go, then the setting is maybe slightly less important, And I think that comes down to the fact that we're talking about, we opened the interview with you guys in front of old, storefronts where I'm sure the acoustics and all that stuff far from ideal, but
those were some of my favorite performances in a long time. I mean, and then obviously in hindsight, they were the last ones we were able to do. So like I have, a certain fondness for that day, but like in my mind, but I mean, even remember just in the moment doing it. I remember specifically being like, this is so cool. Like, I mean, first of all, just because I wasn't sure if anyone was going to come at all. And then there was, like each place that we went to, there was like a little crowd around us, like, I don't know how many people, but whatever. And just being out, like, I've never really done that kind of like busking thing, like out on the street in New York, and it was beautiful. It was like a weirdly beautiful day for the time of year that it was. And it was just like, I don't know, it just felt really good to play outside without a microphone for people and to be playing those songs, the new music. It's almost like it was almost like it was better because the acoustics were not ideal, because it was like we were just kind of leaning into that, and it was a fun day.
Do you obviously you haven't been able to play proper live shows. You've mentioned radio stuff and remote collaborations, but how much have you missed playing live on a stage over the last year and some change at this point?
I mean, a lot. Like, especially, I mean, early on it was like just devastating. It was like totally like the world collapsed, and it was kind of traumatizing because it's just like, who am I right now? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like everything that I had kind of built my identity around was, at least, creatively, was no longer available to me. And so that really sucked, for a while, but like, then it got to a point now where I'm like, I'd really miss it still, and I'll like dream about it, or like, just daydream about it and think about. It's gotten to a point where like there's a huge feeling of gratitude for ever having had those experiences in the first place. Like just being like, I can't believe, like I'll think about like festivals we played, or even just anywhere. Like I just like any show, I'm so grateful to have been able to play, and for like, the memories of like people would come and see us play live. It's, it's such a beautiful thing. And like, and it's funny because it's not like, even at the time, I don't think I never really got like jaded. Like I always loved it, and I always kind of thought about how great it was that we got to do it as for, for a living. But like now when I think back at it, I'm just like, I mean, I think it's because the other side of that is like, I could not possibly imagine playing a show. Like at this point, like, it's like, it feels like a whole different universe it feels like a dream. It feels like it didn't actually happen. And I'm sure it's definitely going to happen again. We really want to play shows as soon as we can, but like, but yeah, I'm like scared to do it. Like,
yeah,
I'm definitely like, like, I mean, I'm not even talking about like, the safety reasons for being scared, like we wouldn't do it if it wasn't like 100%, safe. But it's more just like, I'm just like, we're going to suck. Like, we're going to be so rusty or like whatever. Like, but again, I mean, even that is like, we would have to get together and rehearse and all that stuff. Like, but yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird thing. I get like nerves now when I think about playing shows. But at the same time, I miss it and I really want to do it.
It probably wasn't like that before, right? Like rolling into a show.
No,
the nerves had long since faded. I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I would say like, yeah, like I was saying, like I was never like jaded by, you know, I always was grateful for being able to play shows, but like, yeah, it was definitely got to a point where it was very like business as usual. Like, we're going to roll up, we're going to play the show. Like, it didn't even matter. Like, it could, because, you know, on tours, depending on the city, you're either, you know, for us, it's like we could be playing for anywhere from 300 to 1,500 people, depending on the city or whatever, or more, or less, you know?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't really matter, you know, like it would be like, well, this is the important show. This is like, you know, the San Francisco show, or this is the New York show. Like, you know, I wouldn't get nervous, and it was just, you know, I guess the more people, the more exciting it was, or whatever. Whereas earlier on in this band, I would get very, very nervous. I was kind of scared of playing shows. It's almost like I'm back to being like 23 or something.
I mean, there's something maybe sort of beautiful about that, and then there's something weird about that too. I think it's so interesting. Half a Human is almost sort of like a reflection on the monotony of being on the road, and then I think about how interesting that the last year has turned it on its head. So I hear it in like when I think about it now, or when I first started to engage with it, that half a humanness, it felt like it was speaking directly to the half of humanness that I feel and have felt for a long time, you know, like our brains are all a little scrambled after this weird thing. So I wondered, you know, what does it feel like to have the lyrics almost, is it the case for you often that the lyrics open up and bloom into new things as time goes on?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I often, or especially in the past, like I would often not really know what I was even writing about until, like, you know, months later,
Right.
and then maybe playing the song over and over again live, it would start to kind of take on new meanings for me. But yeah, I mean, that definitely happened with this song. I mean, Bleecker was kind of the first person to point out, he was like, feeling like half a human in this mess. Like, he's like, that's so like, it means such, you know, it's like, it means something very different now or something, or like he's like, it's a weirdly prescient lyric. But yeah, I mean, yes, it definitely, a lot of, I mean, everything's taken on new meaning now, I think, with, yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely. There's another couple lyrics that I thought were really, really, really interesting on this new thing, and I really focused in on Ribbon, where you sing, "This vessel sustains me, but it cannot contain me. You will not convince me this is all there is for me." And I thought that was obviously such a beautiful thing, and on the same front as Half a Human feels like it has these multiple meanings and sort of various things. Like, I thought that lyric really beautifully reflected on lots of stuff at once, you know? It almost seems like a reflection on being in something we've already touched on, sort of a recognizable band, or a band that has been, you know, and when I say that you guys have a distinct sound, of course, like I mean that positively, you know, but at the same time, when it interacts with the realities of the marketplace and the music business and all that stuff, I mean, it can, I imagine, feel sort of like constricting too. Did you feel like that song sort of coming from that direction, or was it maybe something more? Where's your head at metaphysically these days? Because it feels like it's tied to that too. You know what I mean?
I could definitely. I mean, I like that lyric too, for the same reason that I feel like it could mean so many different things. But specifically, I mean, I wrote that song in the back of the van on tour, or I wrote those lyrics.
Yeah.
So it's literally like the vessel is like the van that we're riding in.
Yeah.
And it sustains me because I pay my bills by touring.
Right.
But, you know, but I'm like, I was kind of, you know, just exploring the notion in my mind of like, you know, is this what I'm going to keep doing for the rest of my life? Like, am I just going to be in this van when I'm like 50? Maybe, you know, maybe that's not a bad thing at all. Cause I love playing music and I love touring. So like, but just kind of, I think, I mean, that a lot of the songs, especially on the main thing, were kind of thinking about that same kind of idea of like, I'm, in my mid 30s and I've been doing this now for a decent chunk of time. And like, I guess maybe this is like what I do now or something, like it kind of just thinking about how life is finite and what you choose to do with your life. And what that means. And like, if it's important or like how important it is, like, in relation to the other things that I do with my life, like being a dad and like whatever. So yeah, that is what that song specifically is about. But it's also true that, yeah, like, I kind of have had those same thoughts also about, it's basically, you can look at it in the lens of touring or in the lens of like, the type of music that we make or just the act of making music at all. Like it's kind of all lumped into the same feeling.
Yeah, and I mean, you had already talked about that feeling as the pandemic set in, certainly as the lockdown became part of the reality of asking yourself, who am I? What do I do? If I'm not doing the things I do, who am I? And are those the things that make me who I am? All that feels tied in. And I mean, and then on Soon, it feels like you're also leaning into some of that weirdness. I specifically remember having a conversation with my wife, Becky, and we were, I don't remember at which point of the pandemic it was, but it was, I had this dumb realization. And when I say dumb realization, I mean, it's an apparent thing that it just took me forever to notice. But I was like, this is not going to end in a way that feels satisfying to the way our brains want it to end, because it's just going to sort of sputter into some sort of new beginning, and it's going to feel iffy and weird. And the thing we want, which is everything is back to normal. That's not going to happen.
Everyone partying in the streets, like,
right,
like it's over now. Yeah, I know. I've had that same thought for sure.
Well, and on Soon, you sort of lean into that. You're like, there's no such thing as soon, and it feels like you're talking about that really the present moment is the moment. And do you sing? Is it? I don't have the lyrics, so I'm just like listening. But
sure.
Do you sing the stars have never been my thing?
My guide, yeah, like
my guide, right? Yeah.
Like,
so it's sort of like you've never been somebody who's like out in the sort of more woo-woo side of things,
I guess, or like, I don't even know what I was saying there. Like, it's hard to get myself back in the headspace of like writing those words. I think that I more was talking about like, yeah, maybe. I think what I was maybe saying is like, I tend to just kind of stumble through life. Like it kind of like opportunities present themselves or like things happen and I react. Where, I don't really have like it's also kind of, I think, a little bit reflecting on some of the lyrics from Atlas, the Atlas record, where I kind of talk a lot about ideas like that. I don't know. I wrote that. That's actually the song that I did write during the pandemic, or the lyrics. I mean. So they are definitely like reflective of all that stuff that's going on right now. And it is definitely just kind of like a feeling of being lost. And that's also, I think, one of the, because I've written a bunch of songs since then, lyrics, I mean, but I think those were the first lyrics I wrote, and it took me like a few months to really be able to, I wrote a lot of songs early on in this thing because I was just like bored, but I didn't write a lot of lyrics. I didn't write any lyrics because I just like didn't know what to write about, or was sort of like frozen because I really didn't want to write about like this. I didn't want to write.
These are my statements about the moment or whatever.
Like, and so that's the first thing that I wrote that kind of was like kind of peeling off the Band-Aid. And I've been able to write more since then, but it was definitely just like, it's almost stream of consciousness. Like I would have to, that's probably one of the songs where like, I don't think I've listened to it even since I've written it enough to like know even what I'm talking about, to be quite honest. Like,
Have you started lyrically, or rather as a songwriter? I mean, 5 years ago or so, maybe 6 now, you put out a solo record. Do you feel like moving forward with the potential for things to still, I mean, just with the future sort of feeling uncertain, let me put it that way, do you feel like you have another solo album in you, or did at some point you decide that you wanted the songs you wrote more or less to be real estate songs for the most part? How does that, is there any sort of division in your head?
I mean, there is, but usually the division is just like, I make a choice post whatever the last thing we were working on is, whether or not the next thing is going to be a solo record or real estate record. And I've only done that one solo record.
It's a beautiful record. I really, really love. I've revisited that too, and
Thank you.
I want to, like, I revisited it to get ready for this interview, and when I listened to Many Moons, I hadn't listened to it for a couple of years, and I was shocked to find that every single song, like I remembered every single song like intricately, and it was like a weird
That's
thing
so
for
cool.
me. I was like, wow, this record's so good. So anyway, that's sorry.
Thanks.
That's
No, I mean,
something.
thank you. I'm proud of it too. I was really happy with it when we made it, and it's one of those things where now that it's been out for a few years, like, I almost look back on it more fondly. But the answer is yeah. Like, I'm actually working on a solo record right now. So, cause yeah, I mean, like you said, like, things are, that was kind of a decision that I made last year. Although I basically was just writing a bunch of songs. I didn't really know what I was going to do with them. And they were kind of like amorphous ideas. And then, yeah, at a certain point, I kind of made a decision, because we were like real estate. We were kind of talking in the band about when we would make another record. Initially, we were like, let's just make one right away. Or let's, once this thing is over, like, this fall, fall of 2020, like back in this, like last summer, we were like, I'm sure it'll be over soon. Like, and we can,
Right.
kind of knowing that wasn't going to happen, but we were like, maybe we can get together, or, like, I guess we weren't really anticipating the like second horrific like wave.
Yeah.
But we were like, especially last summer when things were kind of relatively chill.
It felt almost like now,
Yeah.
now more so, but then, yeah, I know what you mean.
It felt anyway, we were like, maybe we can get together. And then that kind of like stopped being something that we thought was going to happen. And then I was just like, I don't really want to, I don't know. I was like, it's been, I kind of had the realization last fall that it had been 5 years. I was like, oh wait, that's weird. It's been 5 years since that last record came out. And I was like, I think it'd be fun to make another solo record. And it's almost like, it just doesn't, like, to me, like, the stakes are lower with the solo record. Like, I mean, I would love to tour, but like, if I can't tour, I don't really mind. Or I don't know, whatever. And it just felt like it was the right time. So anyway, so yeah, that is what I'm doing right now. It's actually like halfway done. So
Nice.
Yeah,
I'm
excited.
Do you find some of that same experimentation entering into the equation?
Yeah,
That you've been exploring more with real estate, I mean?
For sure. I mean, it's more like because it's just me. I mean, it's so stupid. Like, I don't want to like be like cagey, but I also haven't really. This is the first time I'm talking about the fact that I'm doing it. Not that it really matters. But like, so it's just me and this one other person that I'm doing it with. But basically, I'm playing everything on it, but the drums. So it's just a very, very different experience. Because like with real estate, everything is extremely collaborative. And with this, it's like I'm making every single decision. So yes, it's like very experimental in a very different way from real estate, where the experimentation comes from like,
The collaborative,
kind of like collaborative
group dynamic, yeah.
Yeah, or like even just like being able to sit in a room and play the song 10 times or 100 times and like try different directions. Like with this, it's like it's all coming from me, which is can be paralyzing, and I'm trying to just like ignore that part of my brain and just like I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm doing a lot of it at home too. Like I did like the basic tracking in a studio with this other person, and then I'm finishing it at my house and in this room basically. So
yeah,
it's
that's
exciting.
nice. Well, it looks like you've got everything you need there to do stuff and have fun.
Yeah,
I don't want to I don't want to ask you to explain something that you're not done making yet. But before we wrap up, and it's been a real pleasure hanging out with you. You mentioned sort of stumbling through things and just like kind of looking at opportunities and knowing when to sort of seize them. And I wanted to ask about something that I saw referenced. In 2017, you guys played a show that was centered around Twin Peaks: The Return. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was like a South by Southwest thing. Yeah.
So, and Agent Cooper himself, or Dougie Jones, however you want to put it, or Mr. C, Kyle MacLachlan introduced you guys. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Are you a big Lynch fan or Twin Peaks fan overall?
I mean, yeah, yes. I mean, I definitely not as much as like even other members of my band.
Were some of the other guys freaking out about that whole situation?
I mean, yeah, like I wouldn't say freaking out. They played it cool, but like definitely it was exciting.
Yeah.
And Kyle MacLachlan's cool. Really cool. But actually I had seen some episodes of Twin Peaks and I thought it was good. But then I don't think it was until after we even played that show that I finally actually watched the whole thing. But yeah, that's just that was like, it was cool because it was, related to Twin Peaks and we got to meet Kyle MacLachlan and that was really cool. But it was definitely just like a Showtime, like the TV channel, like showcase at South by Southwest. It was just like another showcase. But there were some cool elements about it for sure.
I think about how deeply weird the third season of Twin Peaks was. It's probably my favorite, maybe my favorite like TV thing I've ever seen. And then I think about the sort of weird incongruity with like a promotional event for something that is so far out, and I think as somebody who paid attention to everything, I have to say it's to Showtime's great credit that they let David Lynch do what he wanted to do with that.
I mean, that's like, I think that's like the whole thing with that show though, to me, or at least like the first two seasons, the fact that they were like aired on network television, like,
right?
It's so cool. I mean, so that's like, that's almost, I mean, I wouldn't say like, it adds to it. I wouldn't say not knowing that it would be a lesser show, but like with that, keeping that in mind while you're watching it, it's just like, it kind of just adds a whole nother element to it. Cause you're just like, I can't believe this was on like whatever primetime, like TV, when I was growing up. And I remember being like vaguely aware of it, but I never watched it as a kid. But yeah, definitely that concept of like, yeah, this super duper weird thing having like a South by Southwest like normal ass showcase, like, although it was still cool, like, because they got us to play, so like,
exactly,
it's like extra cool. I'm being sarcastic, yeah. Like, but yeah.
Well, as much as I hope that there is, I hope that what we saw was the end of Twin Peaks, honestly. But if there is more Twin Peaks somehow, I hope that David remembers that South by Southwest showcase and gets you guys in the bar so you can join people like Sharon Van Etten and Eddie Vedder and Nine Inch Nails, all the people who he featured on the third season, along with so many others.
Yeah,
I hope that's the case.
I would be. I would not say no to that. I'd be very excited.
Martin, it's been really great hanging out with you and talking about this stuff. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. It was fun.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Transmissions. Our show airs each Wednesday wherever you get podcasts and, of course, at aquariumdrunkard.com. I'm Jason P. Woodbury. I write, host, and produce Transmissions. Our audio is edited by Andrew Horton. Sarah Goldstein does visual design, and Jonathan Mark Walls makes video/audio player things for all of our social media and YouTube. Our executive producer, of course, is Justin Gage. We'll be back next Wednesday. I'll be joined by Noah Lekis and Ethan Miller of Howlin' Rain/Comets on Fire for a sort of wide-ranging countercultural discussion. Before we get out of here, though, a recommendation. I think you should check out Gary Panter's Crash Pad, which is a new graphic novel/fine art monograph sort of underground comic situation. Gary Panter is one of the legends of that genre, and he kind of came up with this incredible psychedelic hippie yarn that goes all over the place metaphysically and sort of embraces, I think, the utopian ideas of the hippies. And Gary is, one of those longtime heads. In it, he goes as far as to suggest a lot more reading material for somebody who's interested in the subject, and he shouted out past Transmissions guest and Aquarium Drunkard contributor Jesse Jarnow's great book Heads, which is a biography of psychedelic America. So go back and check out my talk with Jesse about Heads in the archives, and go get yourself a copy of Crash Pad wherever you buy comics or books. It's really beautiful. Fantagraphics does just the top of the line stuff in terms of their end papers and sort of presenting it as like a fine art piece. So check out Crash Pad. We'll be back next Wednesday with another talk, so stay safe until then, and we'll speak with you more